Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Kicking It Classic with JCD. I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. And as always, Kicking It Classic with JCD is part of the PWP Nation network. Check out pwpnation.com. Lots of great articles, stories, editorials, news, and so much more. Interviews as well. We've been around for 8 years. We're not going anywhere, and it's one of the most real sites you'll ever find on the internet. It doesn't matter what opinion, what point of view, what brand, what company, what superstars you support. Everybody's opinion is welcome. You could check out me, John JCD DiMaselli, at NYC1219 on Twitter. You could follow the show, Kicking It Classic with JCD, on Twitter at KITCWJCD. You could follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/kickingitclassicwithjcd. You can also email us at kickingitclassicwithjcd@yahoo.com. You can check out PWP Nation on Twitter at PWP Nation and follow PWP Nation on Facebook at facebook.com/PWP Nation. So this week, we're going to delve into, for our 5th episode, Wrestlemania 11. And this is a show that, while it doesn't have the biggest drama or backstage turmoil stories in history, there was a little, and we'll get to that. It is looked at as probably one of the bottom 2 WrestleManias of all time, maybe 3, depending on how some people, I guess, feel about WrestleMania 32, but this is generally looked at as one of the worst. And I remember watching it as a kid. I was actually 18 in 1995. Yes, I'm old. And I watched it. You got to remember, this is still the early 90s. The internet was starting to pick up, but it wasn't anywhere near where it is today. So you did have some rumors about where the show was going to go and in what direction, but you didn't have anything that you'd have today. So with that said, we're going to look at the show. We're going to look at it from match by match, because I really feel like this is a show that I think if you break it down in pieces, it's easier to understand versus if you just look at it as a whole, because that's when it could really come off like, oh my God, like a real shit show. Plus, a lot of the build, which probably started around Survivor Series 1994. That's really when this show started to take its shape. So, we're going to start there, and then we'll work our way through, and even the fallout the night after. I'll never forget that post-WrestleMania Monday Night Raw. That had some big moments on it that really shaped WWE for the rest of the year. So with that said, let's go to WrestleMania. Now, in previous years, from WrestleMania 1 even all the way through to WrestleMania 10, if you thought WWE hoard out to celebrities for WrestleMania, you ain't seen nothing yet, because wait till you hear how this WrestleMania 11 was presented in its open. Now, before we get to the open, let's get to the facts of the show. The show was held on April 2nd, 1995 at the Hartford Civic Center for a sold-out attendance of 15,000. What's interesting about this, and just to give you an idea of where business was back in 95, remember, this is still pre-Nitro. WCW was coming on. They had Hogan. They had Savage. And they were coming on strong. They didn't have the NWO yet, and they didn't have Nitro. But this would be the only event, including in your houses and the traditional Big Four pay-per-views, that would not sell out. It's also the first WrestleMania that officially has no correlation or combination of Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, or Randy Savage, So the direction of the show, which we'll go over once we delve into the card, is going to be very different from what we've been accustomed to until now. And with that said, Kicking It Classic with JCD presents WrestleMania 11.
The World Wrestling Federation. For over 50 years, the revolutionary force in sports entertainment now continues with the tradition of WrestleMania. WrestleMania 1. WrestleMania 2. WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 4. WrestleMania 5. WrestleMania 6. WrestleMania 7. WrestleMania 8. WrestleMania 9. WrestleMania 10. Now, WrestleMania 11. This year, starring Baywatch's Pamela Anderson, Home Improvement's Jonathan Taylor Thomas, MTV's Jennifer McCarthy, NYPD Blues' Nicholas Turturro, with special musical guests Salt and Peppa, and featuring Lawrence Taylor's All-Pro Team.
That's right, folks. Over 2 minutes of a WrestleMania intro and not one mention of a single WWF superstar who would be appearing on the show other than a passing by of Lawrence Taylor with his All-Pro team. Other than that, not a single wrestler mentioned. Now, for the promo itself towards the end, the first half of it when they were listing the WrestleManias, those were all based on the celebrities that appeared at those WrestleManias. When it switched over, talking about Jenny McCarthy and Jonathan Taylor Thomas, that featured current superstars who were going to be on the show. Now, what's interesting about this is Pam Anderson is the first celebrity mentioned, and she was the main get for WrestleMania. She originally had a clip with Shawn Michaels because that's who she was originally supposed to be with. Instead, the clip, somewhere along the way, I don't know if it's for the VHS distribution and on, had Pam Anderson coming out of a limo with the entire WWF roster waiting for her. I believe that was actually the clip from the Royal Rumble. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was shown with the British Bulldog and Lex Luger. John Turturro was shown with the Undertaker, Salt and Pepper with Bret Hart, and Diesel was with Lawrence Taylor's All-Pro team. So, again, you could see what the idea is. The idea is to really push the mainstream aspect of the product, which was probably lacking at the time. But, you know, this is the direction Vince went to go with. As whether it worked or not, it's really hard to say. And especially when you look at what the show was, and we're going to delve into the show very shortly, I don't think this worked for this type of show. This probably would have been better connected to WrestleMania 10. And don't get me wrong, WrestleMania 10 had a ton of celebrities. They had Donnie Wahlberg, they had Burt Reynolds, they had Rhonda Shear, they had, you know what? I can't remember the rest of them, but those were some of the big ones that they had. And I think because you were celebrating WrestleMania 10 at the time, I think this kind of celebrity push would have been bigger for that show versus this one, which shows just how, I guess, lacking the word would be, the interest in the product without really a lot of stars in prominent roles. Because you still had Bret Hart and The Undertaker. Diesel, Kevin Nash's Diesel was kind of somewhat becoming a crossover star. He had done some TV work. I believe he did a couple episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. I know Bret Hart did. I think Nash did as well. But you really didn't have much else as far as, you know, Shawn Michaels wasn't Shawn Michaels yet. Razor Ramon, for some reason, he'd always seemed like he had just a very low ceiling as far as attraction. And then that was really it. Were you really buying into Lex Luger, the British Bulldog, Tatanka, King Kong Bundy, guys like that? I don't think the Smoking Guns, Owen Hart, they didn't have that mainstream attraction. And this was an interesting show in the sense that this was really the first time without any of the big names like I mentioned previously, without a Hogan, without a Warrior, without a Savage. Piper was there as a special guest referee. And Hart and Undertaker were not really in the highest of spots for this show. So they really were grasping at straws as what to do. And as we go over the card, you'll see that is clearly the case. And, I mean, for a WrestleMania, this is a disaster. And I like I said, the whole purpose of this episode is to see, is it as bad as people have thought it will be? I have my feelings, I have my reservations, but let's get through the episode and see where we end up with it. So let's get right into it. The opening match of the show was a very randomly, at the time, put together tag match between Eli and Jacob Blue facing a new tag team called the Allied Powers, which was Lex Luger and Davey Boy Smith. Smith had returned to the company at SummerSlam 94. Luger was kind of in limbo after not winning the title at WrestleMania 10. A loss to Tatanka at SummerSlam 94. His team losing to Tatanka's team, the $1 Million Corporation at Survivor Series. And Luger not really having a big presence at the Rumble. In 1995, it kind of was like Luger was kind of just there at that point. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who really fell from the card. It really was Lex Luger. Well, anyway, they put together this new tag team, which sounded great. I mean, it sounded like a really good idea. Two big name guys getting together. The Allied Powers was a cool theme, and we would see where it goes. On paper, the Blue Brothers, which was Eli and Jacob Blue, who are actually more famously known as the Harris Brothers, were a new tag team as well. And there was actually some belief that maybe the Blue Brothers would go over a big enough team like Davey Boy Smith and Lex Luger to maybe start a push and maybe even start a potential feud with the Smoking Guns over the WWF Tag Team titles. So the match happens, and Luger and Bulldog, in a nice surprise, pick up the win. And you kind of got a feeling right away that Luger and Bulldog had good chemistry together. And you kind of got a feeling that something was coming with them as a team. That this was not just to get two guys on WrestleMania. Something was coming, and it would make sense a little later on during the show. The second match of the night was where some of the creative decisions maybe get a little head-scratching, and maybe it affects how this show is looked at. It pitted Razor Ramon with the 1-2-3 Kid in his corner, challenging Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental title, and he had the Roadie in his corner. Now, the main gist behind this story was Roadie had been helping Jarrett. Jarrett beat Ramon for the title at the Royal Rumble with help from the Roadie, so the 1-2-3 Kid was going to neutralize the Roadie, and Ramon was going to get his fair Intercontinental title rematch and hopefully pick up the title. However, this does not happen, as Ramon wins the match, but only wins it by disqualification, which really was one of those head-scratching moves, as again, Ramon would be in chase mode on Jarrett for a while and would actually not get the belt back from Jarrett. Jarrett would actually go on to eventually drop the title to Shawn Michaels, and then Ramon would get the title back later in the fall when Michaels would get attacked, and Ramon would win the title in that impromptu match with Shane Douglas. But this was the first where it was like, huh? Like, really? Okay. So they go that route with the IC title match. Ramon does not win the title. Next matchup, and this is one that has, over the years, maybe had some small backstage chatter that the result was going to be different. But The Undertaker faced King Kong Bundy, and the storyline was being here that DiBiase was looking to reclaim the urn. This goes back to the early 1994 summer storyline where Ted DiBiase brought out a fake Undertaker. Then they did Undertaker versus Undertaker. Obviously, real Undertaker won that feud, and DiBiase was still trying to get his hands on the Undertaker and the urn, which in the story was supposedly the power of the Undertaker. There were actually some rumblings here with how Bundy was being presented. And, you know, if you listen to me on other shows and even my other podcast, I'm Popular, and even some of the other shows that have been on the PWP network, you hear me talk about the two main times the streak was supposed to end. This is the forgotten third time that maybe Undertaker was going to lose at WrestleMania. It was actually talked that because Bundy was going to be in line for a monster push, that Bundy would defeat the Undertaker here and go on to a monster run, maybe feud for the title. That doesn't happen. Undertaker defeats King Kong Bundy, but again, just like Bundy had attacked Undertaker at Royal Rumble and stole the urn, here comes Kama. Again, there's a post-match where Undertaker's attacked. Kama takes the urn, but Undertaker actually lays out Bundy and then beats him pretty decisively. And then we move on to an Undertaker-Kama feud. And the fact that the Undertaker match is third on this card should already tell you where we are. When I mentioned earlier that Bret Hart and the Undertaker, while on the card, were not featured predominantly in major matches or major places on the card, the fact that Undertaker went on third should show you that, you know. And also, too, the fact that this isn't a big card. I believe, off the top of my head, we have 4 matches left. So we're looking at a 7-match WrestleMania. While some matches were given time, and rightfully so, this is a 7-match WrestleMania, and that's unheard of. The next match up had some of the more higher level of intrigue, as it was the Smoking Guns defending their WWF Tag Team titles against Owen Hart and a mystery partner. And I mean, for the most part, everybody assumed it would probably be Jim Neidhart or somebody of that nature, but fans were legitimately surprised. I remember watching this and being like, wow, okay, when Yokozuna came out as Owen's partner and they pretty much decimated the Smoking Guns and won the tag titles, I want to say in under 10 minutes. Let me pull up the official time here. 9 minutes and 42 seconds. So yeah, there you go. Now, tying into Owen and Yokozuna is the Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund submission match. Now, this is, when I say the build for this show started around Survivor Series of 1994, this is where it would all tie in. For those that don't remember, Bret Hart was the WWF champion at the time, and he was going to be challenged by Mr. Backlund in it was either a submission match or an I Quit match. Or something to do with the towels. British Bulldog was in Bret Hart's corner. Owen Hart was in Bob Backlund's corner. Halfway through the match, Bulldog gets knocked out, and Backlund puts Hart in the chicken wing. Owen Hart, and this is what a true classic heel is, was, and forever will be, knows his parents, especially his mother, is in the crowd. Backlund probably has Hart in the crossface, I want to say for almost about 4 to 5 minutes, if not more. And Owen Hart starts pleading with his mother, please, that's my brother, I don't want to see him suffer, I'm sorry, I still love him, blah, blah, blah. Gives her the towel and gets Helen Hart to throw in the towel, costing Bret the title, and then as a true heel, grabs the title and celebrates up the aisle. So Hart and Backlund it's the rematch, and Roddy Piper is the special guest referee. And now this just goes to show you where this card is and where this show is as far as the mix of the generations. No Hogan, no Savage, no Warrior, and Piper in a secondary role as a special guest referee. Anyway, Hart would defeat Backlund with the crossface, and then this would be where Backlund cuts the infamous I've seen the light promo and begins the Mr. Backlund for President gimmick that he would take on. And that was it. Piper kind of faded away after that, and then Hart kind of moved back into, however you want to call it, his feud with Jerry Lawler and the eventual debuting Hakushi. And Backlund just started the Mr. Backlund for President angle, like I said about a minute ago. So, it was a good match. It was given some time. It could have been given a lot more. But again, the problem with this show, and I haven't even really delved on it, it's just the celebrity interaction in between each matches and these segments that were horrible. It just was really bad. The next matchup, and this is where maybe some of the backstage drama starts to kick in. Diesel defends the WWF Championship against Shawn Michaels. Now, of course, Shawn Michaels wins the Royal Rumble from the number 1 position. It is also known as the shortest Rumble ever because they did 1 minute in between entrance. Diesel, who was Shawn Michaels' partner at Survivor Series 94, gets super kicked by Michaels, breaks up with Michaels, and then 2 nights later at Madison Square Garden defeats Bob Backlund for the WWF title. So here you go. You've got the eventual match that was coming. Now, with winning the Royal Rumble, Shawn Michaels was supposed to be accompanied with Pamela Anderson. There's talk that there was kind of always a little bit attraction, yet animosity, love-hate relationship with Michaels and Anderson. Jenny McCartney gets brought in. Jenny McCarthy ends up escorting Michaels to the ring. Diesel comes out and ends up bringing out Pam Anderson. The match is fantastic. They get 23 minutes, I want to say, and it is just a great, great match. It's one of those matches that, because the show is looked at as so bad, that gets lost in how good it should be and where it should rank on top of all-time WrestleMania matches. Nash wins with the jackknife powerbomb and retains the title. A lot of people had thought, myself included, that Michaels would probably win the title here. It was, you could kind of see the writing on the wall that Michaels was going to get a title run. You thought maybe this would be it. We'll get to what happens with Michaels, Diesel, and Sid after. And, it's one of those things that you probably look at and be like, they should have went a different direction. But when you look at how things played out, it probably made more sense that they went with Diesel going over here in this spot for the long-term direction of the company. The match is known for the famous shot at the end with Diesel celebrating with, I think, Nick Turturro, Pamela Anderson, and Jenny McCarthy as Michaels and Sid leave. Now we come up to the main event of the evening, and this was ballsy. I'll put it like that. This was ballsy. The main event of WrestleMania 11 is Lawrence Taylor one-on-one with Bam Bam Bigelow. And how did we get here? Well, let's go back and take a look at how exactly we got here. So since the audio really doesn't do it any justice, what had happened was Bam Bam Bigelow and Tatanka had lost the finals of the WWF Tag Team Tournament, and Bigelow was a little embarrassed, and Taylor was sitting at ringside, and Taylor had that big LT smile on his face, put his hands out to Bigelow, and Bigelow thought he was laughing at him, to which Bigelow shoves Taylor, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it was as simple as that. The build was on. Bigelow and, they challenged each other. The match was accepted. There were a couple appearances. Now, Bigelow had the $1 million team with him. Tatanka, I believe Nikolai Volkov, Bundy, Kama, and LT had a bunch of football players, ironically enough, including Steve Mongo McMichael, who actually showed up and did a couple of Raws as well as a scout for LT. So it was really interesting to see that things didn't work out in the company for him, and he would end up in WCW. But the match ends. LT, who gets sang to the ring by Salt and Pepper. Again, another case where the celebrities are dominating the attraction of everything. doesn't look terrible. He actually goes his own. I believe the match goes about 11 and a half minutes. He pins Bigelow. I mean, you could just tell, though, LT is gassed at the end. WrestleMania goes off the air with, LT and his All-Pro team celebrating, and that's WrestleMania. Now, we get to Raw the night after. And WWE played it smart here because they knew everything was going to revolve around Diesel and Shawn Michaels and all that fallout, so they actually kept Bam Bam Bigelow off the show. Now, even though they would tape Raw at times weeks at a time, as far as Bigelow appearing on the show, it would be 3 weeks until we would see Bigelow again. But we go to Raw, and of course, the show, like I just stated, was built around the Shawn Michaels Diesel fallout. And in a moment where, thank God, the internet and the IWC wasn't what it was today, or social media or anything, Alundra Blaze, who was originally supposed to face Bull Nakano, reportedly at WrestleMania, faces her on Raw. However, both women get jobber entrances, which means they come back from commercial and they're both in the ring already. Blaze would retain the title, and then a mystery woman, Rhonda Shing, would end up attacking in leather pants and a mask, would end up attacking Blaze to set up an injury angle for Blaze to go get some quote-unquote cosmetic surgery, and was actually supposed to feud with Nakano, as the story was going to be that they were former partners. However, Nakano was released from the company immediately after drug accusations, most notably cocaine, which might explain why she looks fantastic nowadays, especially all these years later. However, Nakano was gone from the company, and Rhonda Shing was then repackaged into Bertha Faye and would start the feud with Blaze from there. Other than that, the show was kind of bookended by 2 interviews. One was with Diesel, who comes out and does this celebratory interview, but admits that he had to hold back at points last night because of their old friendship. Okay, no problem. Makes a little sense given the history. Nash does a great job of explaining it. Cut to the main event segment, which was Shawn Michaels addressing WrestleMania. And Michaels kind of admits the same thing, that, at times he lost focus because they were such good friends, and at times he remembered back to that. He also then accepts Nash's offer for a rematch, which Nash had made earlier in the night. However, Michaels would say that Sid wouldn't be required for the rematch. I believe, if I remember right, they played up that Sid might have screwed up at some point during the main event, which might have distracted Michaels. So anyway, Michaels was like, you're not going to need it, and he actually relieves Sid of his bodyguard duty. Well, Sid snaps, destroys Michaels, multiple power bombs. The only thing that's weird about this segment, and I'm going to post it on our Twitter and our Facebook page, if you watch the original segment, Sid is cheered because it looked like Michaels was healing him up, and then Sid was retaliating. Sid is cheered in the original segment. However, this would be set the stage for Michaels to take a few weeks off, set up his Monster Face run. Sid would move into a feud with Diesel for obvious reasons. Now, as far as Bam Bam Bigelow goes, we wouldn't see Bigelow until 3 weeks later, until the April 24th episode of Raw, where ironically he would face Nash for the title. Diesel would defeat Bigelow, retain the title, and at that point, Bam Bam Bigelow would be fired from the corporation and attacked by Ted DiBiase's men, including his newest recruit, Sid. So you'd get your combination of Diesel, Sid, Bigelow, Tatanka. They even did a tag match. And then shortly after, right around Survivor Series, Bigelow was gone from the company already. And combine that with no mention of Taylor post-Mania, your whole entire WrestleMania 11 main event by late November was non-existent. Kevin Nash had turned heel after dropping the title to Hart, and Michaels was the only guy who really took off into a stardom, and even that ran into some roadblocks when he got beat up by a couple of Marines in Syracuse. So your top couple of matches at WrestleMania really were not in strong positions in the fall, which is a rarity. So with that being said, as far as a final verdict goes, was WrestleMania 11 that bad? On paper, no. In pieces, no. Long-term build-up, no. But as a show combined, for whatever reason, absolutely it is that bad, and that's why it is one of the worst 2 WrestleManias of all time. Thank you for listening to Kicking It Classic with JCD. Again, I am your host, John JCD Demiselli. In 2 weeks, we will have our Season 1 finale, Episode 6, WrestleMania 8, one of the most rebooked shows of all time. Please, I hope you turn in. And again, to anybody who's been listening, thank you. And again, this is just a reminder, you can find us on Spotify, Speaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and so many more outlets. Again, I can't say it enough. We are over 105 plus listens on Speaker alone. Thank you so much to anyone who has listened and who will keep listening. And to anyone who's just joining us for the first time, thank you. Check out our previous episodes. And again, I am John JCD Demiselli. Until 2 weeks from now, I say thank you, and I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode and all our episodes so far in Season 1, because I've loved producing them so far and putting them out, and we hope to do a lot more content going forward.